Okay, we're back. So I went ahead and did some scaling work here. I felt that the midsection was extending just far too big, and so I'm also going to scale this up a bit, and we're just going to scale it up by a factor of 0.1. Then I'm going to restack everything. And I'm actually going to flip this. There, that'll be a little bit more interesting. Now, I'm going to take this part here. And again, I'm going to scale down all these pieces. I've already scaled them down once, but there's still just too much. And one thing I can do here to even it out a little bit is I will come in with a new cylinder, placed right there. And then I just went ahead and snapped it in place to add a little bit of length to this here. But I'm going to draw this up a bit. Pull this here. Because there's one more detail that I want to add. And as this is, it's just too much. Now, this is one reason why you don't want to freehand move things around, just because they kind of fly off into space. Okay, so grab the top here. Span this pole just a little bit there. Just went 20 millimeters up. Now I'm going to reconnect. And then I'll take this little connector that I made here, add that back into there. And before I pull these two pieces back together, I'm going to show how I did the little detail inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and lift this up here. Stretch it both ways until it goes beyond the gap. Then I'll just push it down inside there like that. And I'm going to do a different type of ring than what I did before. I'm going to use a cylinder. And I'm going to give it a diameter of 20 to start with. So we'll bring that down. We'll go to 15 with a height of 2. Make a nice little disc out of it. And then we'll hide this for a moment. Pull it over to here. And as you can see, it's well over the size, but I do want it to be to some degree well over. Now I just had to unhide everything, which means my staff over here needs to be rehidden, but I'm just going to quickly glance here at the detail. Okay. Now I know what I did on that part there. I'm not trying to make like I said, a copy of that one. I'm just trying to show the basic forms of what I did. So initially I'm going to start just about where we see the bottom plate. And I'm going to pull it up here. So I just made a copy. And I'm going to shift this copy up a bit. And on this I'm going to go with 4 millimeters distance. Another 4 millimeters there. And then the final one will extend all the way up inside here. And now, as you can see, I have all the rings done, but they're a little too big. And so we're going to decrease their scale down to about 9.9 of their original scale. Now we have that texture in the middle there, and I'm going to add one more ring to complete the look. Now because I added those rings at a set distance, I want to keep that distance. So I just backed up, added that in, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a rescale. Okay. And the reason I did that is so I can do this. I'm going to grab the bottom of this, it's almost like a ventilation, like a heat venting fin system. But it adds some interesting texture and gives a neat little feel to it. And I need to come in here and make sure that the top, I zoomed in a little bit too much there. Into the very top here, and then make sure that this completely goes inside on both bottom and top. And then I'm going to pull my inner circle, my inner tube, just a little bit out. So that the fins aren't quite as thick. Now, another detail you can add, and I did something similar to this, is I went and on the bottom, just the bottoms, and added a fillet. And so for the fillet on this one, actually that's a fillet, I want to do a chamfer just on the bottoms. And then this chamfer is just going to come up here, and we're going to keep going until it reaches a point where it just disappears inside. Now we have a real fin look to it, but it's still solid. A little bit sharp, not like a part you'd want to grab, but you could throw some lights or something in there, like a light ring. And then we're going to add a top cap to it here. Now in the original, there was just a threaded part that came off of here, but it wasn't actually threaded, it just had the illusion of threads. But what I'm going to do is something similar to what was actually on the staff on the final parts. So first thing we need to do is join everything together. At least these parts anyway. Make sure that's all together there. That way I can come in and reconnect. Missed it. Okay. There we go. Everything's sitting on top of that. We'll ensure that this is just a little bit bigger than it's currently at, because it's supposed to be a coupler, and so it needs to be healthy enough looking of a diameter that it would actually add support. And now I'm going to zoom out because I added a piece here and it did not attach to where I wanted it, so I'm just going to delete it. Okay, so what we need is a flat surface in order to bring our shape in. And So I'm going to use one of these inner rings. I'm going to drag this up here, and then we're going to get it centered on top. Or as centered as we can get it. Okay, now here comes the trick. First thing I need to do is we're going to add a circle. So you're on the top of it, because I want a perfect cap. And now because I did not change the diameter of either object, all I need to do is go down -10, and I will end up with a perfect cap. And then I'm going to use scale factor, non-uniform, and I'm going to draw it out on both sides. I'm going to really quickly make a copy here of the top, rotate it 90 degrees, pull it all the way down until it's past that part, and then I'm going to join these two together. Okay, so I've gone and joined those together now. I need to do a little bit more scaling here, so we're doing a little more shaping. I want this to have sort of an oval shape. And because of the way it's made, this is actually a bit too long. So I'm going to undo it just a little bit here. And we're going to start off with a sphere instead. I wasn't getting the shape I wanted. And what I'm looking for is sort of an egg. The shape of an egg, similar to what's below it, but I want a much larger one. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a square here, get it to magnetically snap, and thankfully it's right in the center, which is perfect for what I want. I'm going to crush this down a bit here. And then I want to expand it completely on both sides until it overpasses the shape underneath. And then I'm going to draw it all the way through. And you can guess what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a cut. So I've now created a space between. Now we're going to move this up a little bit. Now on the bottom of this part, I actually want to do a cylinder here. Now we just lost our cylinder in space, so let's bring it in again and get it attached to something nearby. There we go. So now we have it attached to something, and now it's centered in the middle here. Now I want to rotate it, but I'm not actually attaching it to the center of this part. I actually want it to be the center of this. And the easiest way to do that is going to be to move this off of here, pull this down, connect it to this cap, and then draw it all the way back up to where I need it, which is right about there. And then again, I take this cap here, put this cap there, and now I'm going to make a cut on the top of this. I want to duplicate this object because I want to use it as the cap. So all I'm removing is that, and then I'm attaching these two parts together, and now I've created this bulge rather than a end-looking part. Now this isn't quite the shape I need it to be yet, so now that I've separated them, I'm still going to uniformly scale them together. But I want them a bit more like that. And then again, I'm going to use a snap point here. I'm going to pull this one all the way up until it's sticking in on all sides. And then I'm going to pull everything out. Now, unfortunately, in this case, I'm going to need to copy this. But the end result's going to give me that nice shape there. And then I'm going to create a base inside of it. So, using that to angle there. Just so that all my parts are connecting together properly. I want to make sure that this is over the size of that. In fact, actually I'm going to make this part smaller than what it's sitting on, which will be corrected later. And I want to drag this all the way up, but not quite to the top. Pull it a little bit into here so that it sits center inside and below on this side here. And then I'm going to connect these two parts back together into one solid piece. And then I will bring in a very small, about half the size of my normal cylinder here. We're actually going to go a lot smaller than that. About there. But not just one, I want to do a couple of them. These ones are going to be a bit smaller. Now every surface is going to have a center as long as it's flat, so I'm going to go ahead and position those at the center there. Copy that, and then I'm going to put it over on the center here. Now, in order to do the effect that I want, I'm going to need to copy all three of these. And then I'm going to reduce one of these. And now you'll be able to see how far I've reduced it until you click off. Now I'm going to cut out that part that I just reduced, create a barrel shape. Because this is going to be similar to a staff weapon you would see in, say, Stargate. Only a little bit different. Okay, so now that I have my sides set, I'm going to go ahead and draw them down in. So they're just barely popping out of the top there. And then, to give it a little bit more interest, I'm going to add another cylinder here. Only this time, just half of the cylinder. Now I know that the cylinder has a diameter of 20. Which means if I pull it over 10, it'll be halfway on, which doesn't appear to be the factor here. So let's double check our measurements. It says it's 20, so I should be able to hypothetically move this over 10. But I don't see that working quite right. Might actually be better if I do this, for at least what I'm doing. We're going to go ahead and just snap it on top of there, and then actually I have a slightly better way to do this. We're going to copy this object. These are not connected yet. All it is just these the box along with these two sides. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to pull, if it'll let me, both sides in. Now I'm not changing the height, I'm only changing the width. And my reason for doing this, you'll see in just a moment. Okay, so I have that. Now I need a box primitive attached to the top here. And I need this to have a larger scale. Now you can always scale your boxes up before you actually place them. I just do it this way because it's quicker for me to use the keyboard, because I have to click over and it becomes a little redundant. So all I want is the smaller of these parts here. I want to select that and then select that. Now I have some leftover parts that I'm going to delete, and then I'm going to bring this in here, copy it, and then I'm going to cut it. The reason I copied and then made a cut first is because once I drag it down, I'm now hollowing out some of the inside. Which will let me do some really cool things with it in a minute, just to add some details. And so I have these tubes now, which we know how deep they are. We're going to go ahead and make a two diameter tube attached directly to the top of this. Copy that, and then attach it to the top of this one. And my reason for doing this is just for a little added depth to the model. So now I'm going to select my object here, cut both of those off, and now I have a slightly indented piece where if you wanted to, you could drill it out, maybe add some batteries, lights, etc. Now you can see there is a gap here. And now in order to get rid of that gap, which I do want to get rid of it, I'm going to just pull this in until they overlap. And then I'm going to fuse the two together again. But I can only do the one side at a time. However, it'll work just fine on this side as well. As soon as the lines overlap, we now get a nice clean edge. And then I'll draw this down to here. And then to make this look like it does what I want it to look like it's supposed to be doing, I need to do one more thing. I've snapped it down to the base of that, and I'm cutting out a circle so that this part looks like it collapses and then opens. Now hypothetically you could do that and actually make it function, sliding little grooves there, maybe springs or something, but mine's just made to look like it opens, not actually function. Now again, I want to reduce the wall size internally, so I'm going to grab those parts. I duplicated this again, and now I'm going to do one more reduction to the outer walls. Only this time, I'm going to try to get it right to the inside here. Now, because everything I'm doing is using snap points, it's a lot easier to find the exact point. Okay, so now I have those nice lines there. I'm going to grab these and pull them up just a little bit. And again, this is all aesthetics. But the more depth you add to your models, the more impressive they become. Okay, so there we go. Now we've added that extra depth. And it's roughly even on all sides. There we go. Okay, so now if I wanted to add, say, like a wire or some technology in there, you could model that in as well. Easiest way to do it would simply be to just make little parts, but I'm actually going to worry more about the externals on this. That would be more of a polyed that you would probably do later on. Okay, so looking at it now, I'm not quite happy with the diameter, or with the full size of it at the moment, so I'm going to do a slight scale and just bring it down a little bit. That's better. And then so I can pull my little tubes out of it, draw that up, and then move these out of the way. As long as I only change one of the coordinates, it's a lot easier to line them back up. And then I want that right there. Just perfectly lining there. Actually, a little bit higher. No, I have a better idea. We'll do this, and then I'm going to take this piece here, and I'm going to cut that out. And then I'm going to raise it just a hair. Not like that. I'm going to raise it up a little bit. And now we have a nice little cutout on the top of it, which I can now pinch together. Okay. And then just a little down. Now inside here you'll notice there's these little loops. I'm going to just pinch these in a bit, bring them up, so that they don't visually interfere with what I'm looking at the moment. Because the way I want this model to appear, very specific pattern to it. Nope. It's not going to let me raise this. Okay, I'm going to hide that for a moment, and we're going to fix this. Okay, so looks like we have a little problem here, which is this polyangle there. We're going to go ahead and just snap this right on top. Pull it over, and then we're going to do a cut. That should get rid of that nasty little circle there. And then again, we can see there's a slight issue with the curve here. It's smaller on one side than it is on the other. That was not intentional. Not by any means. And that tells me that there might be an issue further down. Because it was cut straight from this model. Tells me that the easiest way to remedy it would be to just collapse these. Okay, so I've gone ahead and just snapped them together there. And now the only part I'll be moving are these. And this just a little bit. And then I can show my solids again. height. Now, looking at it, I kind of like the look of pulling this up a bit. All the way to maybe about there. Okay. Then I'll come in with a nice little, I'm not going to use a fillet, but I'm going to use a chamfer on it. And just chamfer the edge in. Now I could have done both sides at once, guaranteed to have a perfect shape, but I'm not too concerned about it. Okay, now go ahead and drop these back down into their respective holes at the heights that I want them at. Okay, now the last detail that I want to do here is going to be a ring. And I'm going to do another cut on my model. Another cut on my little egg here. Only this time it's going to be a bit more extreme of a removal. Okay, now to avoid any mishaps, I'm getting rid of that one temporarily. So I've just hit it. And then I'm going to go ahead and use this as my snap point. I'm going to go ahead and pull this square out here. It's going to need to be a little bit bigger as well. And then I'm going to draw it all the way down to the very bottom, right there. Just enough to give me something that's still printable. Do that backwards. That's something that's still printable, but will easily expand. So we're going to drag this out a little bit bigger than what it was originally, and then we're going to merge it. Now that it's merged together and I select these sides here, I can now push it in and have a perfect cut into my object. With symmetry all the way around at the same distance, regardless of how complex my shape looks. Even though it's simply a circle in this case, but you could do this with anything. And that gives a little bit more interest, I think, to it, a little more dynamic appearance. In fact, I like it so much that I'm actually going to do it on both sides. Now remember that inside here it's actually indented, so I can pull these out. And I get that same look. Although it looks like I did it a little bit too much on one side. There we go. Now, if I want this inner link here to match, which I do, I can simply snap them together. I'll course, there's not actually going to be a snap here, but I think I can make them snap together if I can get my menu to pull up. Having a little technical difficulty. Nope, my menu will not pull up. So I zoom in carefully here. This gives me a much finer movement. And then I'm going to go in until I reach that point. And that's pretty close there. Any difference you could always sand out. Shouldn't be too hard. The reason my screen's moving a little jittery right now is because I have this next to it, which is, of course, a much larger model, but it's simply duplicating several segments. And I'll go over that in a minute. But as soon as I hide that, that'll give me some RAM freed up there, so for my video RAM. Alright, so I think the final step here is going to be lengthening this just a bit away from the previous notch there. And the only way I can do that, because I did join the two pieces together, is if I cut it off, or cut a small disc out of it. I want it to be small enough that it's not going to touch any of the shape, but wide enough that it completely goes through on all sides. Now I select that shape, grab all my parts here, I pull up, and then I can reconnect the two pieces together. Very slight overlap, and voila. I now have a much longer staff cord. And now, the final detail that I wanted to add, let's make sure we save, is the ribbon type leather work that I added to the other model. Alright. Now that was done by a way that I've showed here in other sections, but we're going to go ahead and demonstrate it anyway. So I center that with the core there. Pull this all the way in until it is past there. And then I pulled up a second circle, but not as large as the previous. And then decrease the size on it. Then taking the top again, or the one from the beginning, I then decreased in random amounts the heights on these. And this was just to give the grip some uneven, less refined look. Then once I had this, I was able to drag it up, and then spacing these at different intervals, I could adjust one or the other, and then each one having a slightly different length and width. after so many repeats, you'll get a pattern that you can comfortably repeat without having to worry about someone noticing it. So and these were actually designed to be covered in leather, I believe. And I'm just holding shift down to select multiple parts of the model, as you would with generally any modeling program. And then adding a little bit more variation back into the model as well, since this is a fairly long part. But as you can see, when you look at it closely, you'll notice that not all the parts are staggered at the exact same height. So while it's a detail that most people wouldn't notice, it will show up, especially if you were to wrap it in leather as one whole piece. It would give you a very nice staggered look that would show up quite well in a wrap. Now the last few pieces here, I'm going to pull from the middle, not straight from the end. Again, it's all about just keeping that random look. And there we go, all the way to the top. Now our staff is no longer just some simple part, but a very wide assortment. And then you always like to join parts of your model when they're in sections. The tube underneath here now is really unnecessary. As most of these models are hollowed out, usually to the width of a PVC pipe or a dowel. Carbon rods also work as well. And that will give you a lot higher savings on your prints, and they'll print a lot faster, rather than completely making them solid. Now I'm just going through here and slowly connecting every part together. Okay, so these two pieces did not want to connect, and the reason was the ring in the middle of them actually wasn't attached together. And then for the last part here, one thing I'm going to do a slight alteration on, and this probably will only take a second for you, as we'll have this edited out. But I just felt that this was much too wide. Now, when moving this many objects at once, you will experience a bit of lag. No matter how good your computer is, you are going to get a bit of stalling. It just has to do with the program, not your computer. It's processing a lot of vectors at once, and it does tend to have some hiccups. Doesn't appear it's going to let me, so what we're going to do is a different style. Similar to what I did on the upper fin, I'm actually going to use a chamfer and come in between every single edge here. And I'm going to turn this into a much more functional, much more comfortable grip. And again, if you were to coat this in a second material, and glue down a leather skin to it, the pattern would be very interesting, and it would remove a lot of the imperfections. I'm a big believer in using mixed media. When you are working with your 3D prints, don't be afraid to use real materials along with your 3D prints. They'll not only add strength, but nothing beats the real thing. No matter how good your paint job is, there are certain things that it's just better to have as a real part or a real material, because if you were to show it off to somebody, it always looks nicer. I'm going to go fill it with a radius of about 5, I believe should be more than enough. Nope, maybe a little too much. Let's go to 4. Okay. Now it looks like I don't have an option below 4, so we're going to have to leave it at that. And it doesn't look like I have an option below 4, so this is what my grips are going to end up looking like. Here, as soon as I click off, it should set that in stone. Alright, let's zoom out. Again, we had a little block sitting over there, and now we are back in here again. Okay, so we did miss one of them, and so we'll come back in and put that with a 4, so that it centers off with all the rest. Now we have a much more functional and a lot more comfortable to handle grip. And I'm going to go ahead and do a scaling on this. I'm going to do non-uniform. On 2 axes, both my X and my Y axis, I'm going to change. So I'm going to go 0.9 and 0.9. Because I'm changing 2 of the axes on both sides, I prevent it from turning into an oval and maintaining its circular shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip this. Let's try that again. There we go, 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Click off to remove the focus from the object, and then I'm going to just pull that down a little bit there. Drag that back in so that they connect. And then here, I'm going to actually connect these two pieces of pipe together. I'm going to use a chamfer rather than a soft edge, if it will let me. Okay. Alright, so I have to edit a little bit of the inside here. Due to the fact that it is circular on the bottom edge, the way I'm going to fix that is I will take a box here, snap it to the top inner edge, and then I'm going to drag it up in size just a little bit. Pull off in all directions. All the way over. And now, because my underside is a cylinder with no decorative parts, I'm not going to worry about anything on that because I'm about to take a chomp out of it. And there we go. We reconnect the two pieces. And now I should be able to do my chamfer. From the inside edge, it should come out, and it is going to stop me when I get to here, roughly. Looks like I can maybe go up a little bit. Looks like 2.23 was my max there. And of course, if I wanted to pull out more, I could use just the pull command or extrusion command to pull it out further. That gives me a little bit nicer of a connection. And now, to kind of accent what's going on down here, up here, I'm going to do something a little bit different on this. And that is a vertical grip versus a horizontal. Because sometimes maybe you wanted to do a horizontal grip instead of a vertical one. Now we start off like this, as all our patterns go, but the look that I'm going to end up with will be quite a bit different. Now, one key thing to note whenever you do use a flat surface on a rounded object, you do want to move it in to the object a little bit, just enough that it actually is going through the object. Otherwise, you can run into problems later on. Now, using my circle pattern again, I will select this here, and then I'll use my axis of right there, and I'm going to give this a lot of parts to it. Something straight out of Star Wars lightsabers. I'll do 20. I think that's probably enough to do what I want. Okay. There. Much nicer looking than just a plain handle. Now I can leave it like it is right now, or I can do this. Now, because these are sharp, they would be very sharp edges, I would definitely want to round that out. So one thing you could have done on the pattern before doing this, or if you wanted to add every other one be rounded, you can do that as well. You also do not need to do the entirety of the object, or all of these. You could only do every other. In my case, I'm going to go do the entirety of them. Again, this would have been a lot better if I had done it before I actually put my pattern on. And because it is so much faster, I'm going to go ahead and just do the one. So this is very thin, so I'm only going to give it a chamfer of about 0.5, and then it'll just give me a nice little round edge. And I think we'll go with 25 this time. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and connect all these together to the tube underneath as well. Then we're going to do something similar to what I did with the grip up top, just to make it a bit more functional. So in this terms, this could be simply aesthetics, but I'm going to make it an area that you could hold on to without any discomfort. So select the bottom, on each side, and this can get a little bit tiring on the eyes after a while. You also have to be very careful not to click off of it as well. Otherwise you will lose all of the parts you just selected. So you might want to do maybe a few at a time, or you can risk it all and do them all. So I'm just going to do a radius of 1.5. It's like a radius of 1 on my fillet radius. Yep, radius of 1 will completely fill it in, so. The difference between that will, you'll be able to see a little bit from the outside here angle, but it certainly starts to create an interesting texture to the look. It's a very simple pattern, but that's how you make that, and that's what it looks like when you do it with straight edges instead of rounded. Now you could also, if you wanted something a bit sharper on the grip, you could use, instead of chamfers, you could use fillets, or fillets instead of chamfers. That should be enough there to really show off the difference. And so, after the entire part's done, this detail is not going to show up unless you are looking at it in person. But if I were to turn off my outlines, you can see it gives you almost like a bottle cap texture. Has a nice roll to it, very smooth. And again, remember, when you are working with a lot of parts, it does help to start color coding things. And it doesn't matter what shade it is, just giving it that extra shade will really help make parts stand out, because then not only are you going to realize what parts you haven't connected, but what parts you have. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these together here on that barrel end, and that will make your prints much cleaner. Ideally with this, you would probably have a cut across here and make this as as two different pieces and then connect them together afterwards. Or you could print this. I'm going to do a quick modification here, which is I'm going to cut out one of those. You could print it like this, however it will be a very tight fit. So if I was to move this away here for a second, you see it has a little slat that this would fit into very cleanly. I would not recommend only using this. I would also recommend you put a support rod through here. And ideally, you probably wouldn't want this even freestanding. You would actually want it connected to this and then using the rod inside of here, because you could use a much higher diameter. And so I think that concludes this tutorial. And I hope you learned a lot. If you didn't, I will definitely try to improve. Feel free to leave some notes and enjoy. Happy modeling.